Chevrolet claimed their most powerful Corvette made 435 horsepower. The insurance companies bought the lie. The government regulators bought the lie. Even most Corvette buyers bought the lie. But when independent dyno tests surfaced in the early 2000s, they revealed Chevrolet's biggest deception of the muscle car era. The L88 was making over 500 horsepower all along. This is the shocking truth behind the 1967 to 1969 L88 Corvette, and why General Motors spent 3 years lying about the most powerful engine they'd ever built. The numbers they published weren't just conservative, they were deliberately false. And the reason why will change everything you thought you knew about how Detroit played the horsepower wars. By 1967, the muscle car wars were getting dangerous. Not just for drivers, but for the manufacturers building these monsters. Insurance companies were raising rates on anything that made real power. Government regulators were threatening legislation, and General Motors was stuck in the middle, trying to build legitimate race cars while pretending they were just making family transportation. The Corvette had always been different from other GM products. It was supposed to be America's sports car, the one vehicle in the lineup that could legitimately compete with European exotics. But even the Corvette had limits imposed by corporate politics and insurance industry pressure. Then came the L88, and Chevrolet decided to play a very dangerous game. The L88 wasn't just another engine option. It was GM's nuclear weapon disguised as a mild upgrade. Buried in the Corvette option list as RPOL88, it appeared to be just a step up from the standard 435 horsepower L71 427. Same displacement, same basic architecture, just a different cam and compression ratio. Chevrolet claimed it made the same 435 horsepower as the L71, which should have been the first red flag. Why would you pay extra for an engine that made the same power? The answer was simple. You weren't getting the same power. You were getting a lot more. The L88 was essentially a race engine that Chevrolet happened to sell with a warranty. Aluminum heads instead of iron. Compression ratio pushed to 12.5 to 1. A camshaft so aggressive, it made the car nearly undrivable in traffic. And no power steering, no air conditioning, no radio. Nothing that would add weight or distract from pure performance. But here's what they didn't tell you. This combination was producing over 500 horsepower at the flywheel, making it more powerful than anything Ford or Chrysler were building, and more powerful than most of the European supercars it was supposed to compete against. The proof was in the performance numbers that didn't add up. Car and Driver tested an L88 Corvette in 1967 and recorded a 10.89 second quarter mile at 134 miles per hour. Those numbers were impossible with 435 horsepower in a 3,200-pound car. The physics didn't work. Independent engine builders started whispering about the L88's real output by the late 1960s. Dyno tests showed consistent numbers in the 520 to 540 horsepower range, nearly 100 horsepower more than Chevrolet claimed. But the automotive press largely ignored these findings, either out of respect for GM's official numbers or fear of being cut off from future test cars. The conspiracy went deeper than just horsepower ratings. Chevrolet actively discouraged L88 sales through strategic pricing and dealer education. The engine option cost $947, nearly $8,000 in today's money, and required you to delete options most buyers wanted. No radio meant no entertainment. No air conditioning meant summer driving was torture. No power steering meant parking lots became arm workouts. This wasn't an accident. GM wanted to sell L88 Corvettes only to serious racers who understood what they were buying. The last thing they needed was suburban doctors complaining about an engine that idled rough, got terrible fuel economy, and needed racing fuel to run properly. The dealer network was instructed to steer casual buyers away from the L88. Sales literature barely mentioned it. The few magazine tests that were arranged used carefully prepared cars with conservative driving to avoid showcasing the engine's true potential. Only 216 L88 Corvettes were built in 1967, 80 in 1968, and 116 a year later. Total production of just 412 cars over 3 years wasn't because Chevrolet couldn't build more. It was because they were terrified of building too many. The insurance industry was already targeting high-performance cars with massive rate increases. If word got out that Chevrolet was selling 500-plus horsepower street cars disguised as mild performance options, the entire Corvette line could have been priced out of the market. But the L88's real purpose wasn't street performance. It was racing dominance. This engine was Chevrolet's answer to Ford's dominance at Le Mans and their growing success in Trans Am racing. The L88 was designed to power Corvette race cars that could compete internationally and win. At Daytona, Sebring, and other endurance races, L88-powered Corvettes were consistently running with and beating the best that Ferrari, Porsche, and Ford could field. The aluminum heads shed heat better than iron. The high compression ratio extracted maximum power from racing fuel, and the aggressive cam timing optimized power delivery for sustained high RPM operation. Don Yenko, the legendary Chevrolet dealer and racer, knew exactly what the L88 really was. His race shop was one of the few places where you could buy an L88 Corvette and get honest information about what you were purchasing. Yenko's dyno consistently showed L88 engines, making over 500 horsepower in street trim and over 550 horsepower when prepared for racing. The European manufacturers were paying attention, even if the American press wasn't. Ferrari engineers reportedly purchased and dyno tested an L88 Corvette in 1968, shocked to discover that this 435 horsepower American engine was making more power than their flagship V12 while costing a fraction of the price. The L88's true character revealed itself the moment you started the engine. The loping idle from that radical cam timing announced to everyone within 3 blocks that this wasn't a normal Corvette. At idle, it sounded like it was missing on half its cylinders. Under acceleration, it sounded like controlled violence. But the real revelation came when you actually drove one hard. The power delivery was savage and linear from 3,000 RPM to redline. Where normal big blocks would start to fade at high RPM, the L88's aluminum heads and race-bred cam timing kept pulling like a freight train all the way to 6,500 RPM. The quarter-mile times told the real story. While Chevrolet claimed the L88 and L71 made the same power, L88 Corvettes were consistently running 10.8 to 11.2 second quarter miles compared to 12.1 to 12.5 seconds for the L71. That's not a small difference. That's the difference between a fast car and a supercar. Modern dyno testing has confirmed what racers suspected all along. Restored L88 engines, built to original specifications, consistently produce 520 to 540 flywheel horsepower. The aluminum heads, high compression, and radical cam timing created an engine that was genuinely making supercar power levels in 1967. The cover-up wasn't just about power numbers, it was about market positioning. If Chevrolet had honestly rated the L88 at 525 horsepower, it would have been the most powerful production car engine in the world, more powerful than anything from Ferrari, Lamborghini, or Maserati. Insurance companies would have immediately placed it in the highest risk categories, potentially doubling or tripling insurance costs for buyers. Government regulators would have used the L88 as evidence that Detroit was building dangerously overpowered cars that posed a public safety risk. The entire muscle car industry was already under scrutiny, and a 525 horsepower street car would have provided ammunition for legislative action. So Chevrolet played the game. They built the most powerful production engine in America, maybe in the world, and pretended it was just another performance option. They sold it only to people who really understood what they were buying, and they kept the production numbers low enough to avoid attracting unwanted attention. The strategy worked, at least in the short term. The L88 allowed Chevrolet to compete at the highest levels of international racing while maintaining plausible deniability about building street-legal race cars. The insurance industry never caught on to the real power numbers, and government regulators focused their attention on more obvious targets. But the L88's legacy extends far beyond its 3-year production run. This engine established the template for every high-performance Corvette that followed. Aluminum heads for better cooling, high compression for maximum power extraction, and aggressive cam timing for high RPM performance. The LS6, the LT4, the LS7, even the current LT2, they all trace their DNA back to the lessons learned with the L88. Chevrolet discovered that they could build world-class performance engines as long as they were careful about how they marketed the power. Today, documented L88 Corvettes regularly sell for $300,000 to $500,000 at major auctions. The combination of extreme rarity, proven racing pedigree, and historical significance as Chevrolet's first 500-plus horsepower production engine has made them among the most valuable Corvettes ever built. The irony is that modern Corvettes now routinely exceed the L88's power output, but they do it with sophisticated engine management, variable cam timing, and emissions controls that were unimaginable in 1967. The L88 achieved its legendary status through pure mechanical aggression and Chevrolet's willingness to lie about what they'd actually built. The L88 proved that American manufacturers could build engines that matched or exceeded anything from Europe, but only if they were willing to play games with the insurance companies and regulators who were trying to kill the performance car market. For 3 years, from 1967 to 1969, you could walk into a Chevrolet dealership and buy the most powerful production car in America for the price of a well-equipped family sedan. Only 412 people figured out what Chevrolet was really selling, and most of them were racers who understood that the 435 horsepower rating was the biggest lie Detroit ever told. The L88 wasn't just Chevrolet's most powerful engine of the 1960s, it was their most successful deception. A 525 horsepower race engine, disguised as a mild performance upgrade that fooled the insurance industry, the government, and most of the automotive press for over 30 years.